We have over 200 seminars. Oh, thank you. Hey, Ellie. Awesome. So I was just introducing Metagov seminar. If you haven't been before, our seminars are weekly research presentations that we host as part of the Metagov community. And we bring together researchers focused on decentralized collective governance from around the world to share with us what they're learning, what they're working on. And today we're super excited to have, oh, hey, Lee. We're super excited to have Kelsie Nabben here to share about her book. Kelsie is a longtime contributor to Metagov, an OG Metagov researcher, contributor, and works closely with some of our research directors. So Kelsie, I'll let you introduce yourself and your book, and we're super excited to have you present your book today. Thanks for being here, everyone.
Beautiful. Thanks, Val and Metagov and everyone for joining. I'll just get this sharing. Perfect. Accept. So I'm just sorting out my screens and then we'll go full screen. All right, is that showing for everyone? Pop you guys here. Thumbs up. Beautiful. Great. Well, earlier this week, the hardcover version of my book was released. And Tuesday next week, the open access ebook version will be released due to a slight delay from the publisher's side that was beyond their control. So very exciting. Again, I'll go into some acknowledgements about why it's open access and so forth. But grateful just to be able to share it, and my hope is that people would be able to read it and engage with it and provide feedback or share it further online if anything resonates and so forth. I'm hoping we can roll. Cool. So as I mentioned, I'm happy to keep this fairly informal and leave time for Q&A or discussion at the end. Oh, okay. I think they're okay. Let us know if you're not okay. So a brief outline of my kind of intentions for today, and we'll go from there. So first of all, where to get it? There's a lovely link at the top. So Manchester University Press has been the amazing publisher of the book. As I mentioned, the ebook will be out very soon. And then for the Australians, there's a different hardcover link, so you don't want to ship it from Europe, although apparently it's still not cheap to get it on this side of the world in hardcover. But yes, if you prefer a paperweight, then something digital, there you go. And that's just the abstract of the book. But really, this is the first social science book of its kind that I'm aware of that begins to document the blockchain security landscape in terms of the off-chain dynamics of what's occurring in how these decentralized digital systems are secured, as well as some of the geopolitical and physical dynamics as well, which I'll go into. Firstly, some acknowledgements, and these are emphasis on just some, because I don't want to take your whole morning, but yeah, writing a book is absolutely not possible without the support of some really incredible people, some of whom are on this call, many of whom are not, but were just instrumental in helping me formulate and shape my ideas, pitch them, providing feedback on specific chapters. One of the things that was really a standout for me in the experience of doing this research was the engagement with the security community itself. So as an ethnographer, your currency is access to be able to research participants pretty much. And you can imagine in the area of security in particular, it's highly sensitive kind of groups and chats that I was seeking to engage with, and a lot of kind of pseudonymous actors who are very sensitive about their identity and their work and so forth. And so it was a real privilege to be granted access to especially the Security Alliance from when that launched pretty much, which has become kind of a key player in the blockchain security landscape. And you would have seen around, if you've been following anything about anything, of recent rescues, hacks, funds, and so forth. And every single person I quoted in the book approved the quotes too. So that was kind of like some sort of ethnographic miracle, that all those people were happy to be included and quoted, and some even then read whole sections and provided feedback, which was amazing. So placing the book in context, why does this matter? On the right, you'll see a lovely screenshot of my Twitter feed from the other day. And obviously the algorithm is targeted towards me and the research I've been doing because it knows what I'm interested in reading. But surprisingly, all of these headlines made sense to me. They had context due to the couple of years of research I'd done on writing the book and the content that's in there, except maybe doggies. I think that refers to like pet photos. But otherwise, the book goes into things like DPRK, which Lazarus Group is like a sub unit of connected to the Central Intelligence Service there, targeting Mac users in a crypto malware campaign. It goes into freezes and recoveries. So how do you respond to crisis? Who can make legitimate requests to pause funds or unfreeze them and decide what to do? And I don't know if anyone's been watching, but there's been so much happening even the last couple of weeks in the blockchain security landscape. There's been a new initiative called DeFi United, where a whole bunch of protocols have pooled funds to recover what was lost in the Kelp DAO hack, and so forth. And then I mentioned the physical dynamics of security as well. So actually, I think it was Ellie Rennie who's on the call who rightfully pointed out maybe I should call the book Blockchain Security, which would have been nice. It was too far gone with the publisher at the time. But there is this very real increase in kind of in-person incidents, a number of which have been in France, but around the world really. And the book tells some of those stories as well as like how they're responded to kind of behind the scenes by some of the SEAL 911 emergency response team. And then Thorchain has been hot in the headlines again as a decentralized finance protocol, but also a kind of money laundering channel of choice for DPRK for some of these really big hacks. And there's a lot of controversy there around the kind of the moral codes of decentralization and some of the deeper philosophical questions around, censorship resistance and immutability and these kinds of things. Another key section of the book, which I've got on the points there, is around the role of white hat hackers in these kind of quasi-vigilante pop-up organizations, which is really interesting. It's not something that I'm aware of being covered before in the blockchain literature. Obviously, Gabriella Coleman and other kind of amazing academics have gone into these kind of moral roles in other contexts, but it's very strong in blockchain as well. And this is what I talk about, the off-chain dynamics, because there's so much around the kind of code is law and the protocol embedded rules and so forth. But then there's, GitHub enshrined kind of codes of conduct around how these volunteer first responders, for example, the SEAL 911 team and others will steward in the best interests of users and so forth. So really interesting stuff, if you ask me. And then the securing digital futures, I touch on a little bit. That's actually, and I'll go into kind of future research directions. But, one of the guiding questions of the book was really about, well, what does this mean? Understanding the niche of the blockchain ecosystem, but what does this mean in a generalizable sense around online life and the fact that our passwords, our health IDs, our, government data, etc., is all online. And seeing in this very kind of catabolic industry where transactions are irreversible and attacks are kind of rife from a organized crime to a nation state sort of level. What's generalizable there about what we can learn about just living our lives online, and I guess that lends itself to some of the Metagov questions around governance and so forth. Story time. I'll attempt not to break the presentation if I can just move my screens around. I just wanted to give you a short reading from one of the sections. And so this section is on the Bybit hack, which happened in February 2025 and was one of the largest hacks in history. And so the book is narrative style, and I kind of just wanted to give you a flavor of that. I'll go into the content here. So just take a couple of moments and you can just sit back, enjoy your beverages, and I will read. I hope Val hasn't just disappeared because of hotspotting. So Bybit, the largest hack in history. By February 2025, with heightened public paranoia about all things digital and a personal update of my own operational security practices, please don't test them, I found myself more deeply embedded in the security mindset than when I first began this research. I had completed my PhD on resilience in decentralized technologies, spent over a year observing and participating in Security Alliance SEAL, and collected a wealth of anecdotes and insights into how security is coordinated in decentralized contexts. My fieldwork for this book on digital security was near complete. Through this journey, I had witnessed a clear evolution in how blockchain communities approach security, shifting left, as the saying goes, by embedding security practices earlier in the software development life cycle in response to addressing insecurity and ever-evolving attack vectors. And then it happened, the largest hack in history. This chapter tells the story of that event, drawing on insider perspectives from within the security community. It traces black hats, white hats, and many shades of grey in action, revealing how incident response is coordinated across the ecosystem, when it succeeds in protecting the interests of end users, and when it fails due to selfish ambition. The chapter underscores the enduring reality that insecurity is a permanent condition. It also reveals the emergent infrastructure, norms, controls, and feedback loops that scaffold how decentralized communities collectively respond to insecurity. Wrecked, the Bybit exchange attack. Quote, people keep calling this the largest crypto hack ever, but I think it might be the largest hack ever, ... period. That was a quote by Teo Tevano on Twitter, a core contributor to SEAL 911. And a podcast host, you might have heard her on Unchained, proceeding to refer to a swath of previous attacks, including Ronin Bridge, 620 million in 2022, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Poly Network, 611 million, 2020, not DPRK, and CoinCheck, 2018, not DPRK. Suspicious outflows from the Bybit exchange of 1.46 billion were first reported on February 21, 2025 by white hat sleuth Zach XBT in his Telegram channel, Investigations by Zach XBT. Bybit is among the largest cryptocurrency exchanges globally, based in Dubai and sporting around $4 billion of 24-hour trading volume. Zach XBT, crypto famous for his cat and mouse tracing of North Korean hacker activity, later confirmed that the attackers were indeed the Lazarus Group by linking the stolen funds to a wallet address previously used in a DPRK attributed hack. His reward for solving the $1.5 billion mystery was a bounty of around $31,000 from a crypto trading intelligence platform, Arkham, awarded in the native token. The Bybit CEO Ben Zhao confirmed the hack and reported it to law enforcement authorities. The race then began to trace and blacklist attacker addresses as the FBI released a public service announcement for RPC node operators, exchanges, cross-chain bridges, and DeFi services to block transactions, as Lazarus Group followed a pattern of trading funds into ETH, swapping ETH for BTC, and offloading the Bitcoin via exchanges and over-the-counter desks across Asia. Meanwhile, in the SEAL chat on February 2022, someone asked, what's happening with Bybit? P. Cavasaccio, again, a key protagonist in SEAL 911 and now kind of the DAO Fund and a bunch of things going on in the landscape, and an anon, an internet anon, responded in the same minute, we're on it. The comments started coming in as people realized what was happening. Oof, oh damn. One SEAL asked, at P. Cavasaccio, do you have any indicators where the compromise was? Most specifically, is the safe web app being affected? Which indeed turned out to be the root cause of the exploit, according to forensics released days after the event. PCAV replied, sorry guys, can't talk, laters. It goes on, and I could read for a long time, as you can imagine, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea and enough of a foretaste to want to download the book for free in a week and continue reading. I will just come back to full screen and hopefully you can all see that. And so the images here, the one down the bottom is just a picture from Zach XBT, this kind of infamous in crypto land sleuth kind of tracer of on-chain activity. And that's the sort of work that he does around wallet addresses and so on to explain. So some key insights. I didn't want to go into the whole kind of findings section or anything. I just wanted to highlight a few things to sort of stimulate discussion and go from there. So one that I mentioned in the reading just now is this idea of persistent insecurity. And what was really evident within the blockchain context was people don't pretend that they can just go about their daily business and kind of be fine. It was like strongly reinforced in a lot of the events that occurred and also the sort of attitudes of the security responders that anyone engaging in blockchain has to be extremely cautious about their actions. And this is expanding, very broadly to, fake uh, call requests, not even interview requests from unsolicited contacts. But I saw one the other day that was like an AI impersonation of a founder of a major protocol. So the person got on the call and they thought they were talking to someone that they know. And in the meantime, they're running software that they're not aware of by clicking certain links to join the call that then lead to compromise of their devices and so forth. So this idea lends itself to the broader kind of questions around cybersecurity futures, and that's something I'm also interested in researching further around, especially AI and quantum. But what do the things occurring within the blockchain landscape mean for cybersecurity more broadly? Second point here, emergency security coordination. So very much right place, right time in terms of, I started this research just before the launch of the Security Alliance, which was the first kind of major, like I said, quasi-vigilante group. It's a registered not-for-profit organization based out of the US. It's led by pseudonymous, blockchain famous white hat hacker Sam CZ who kind of leveraged his reputation to pull together a really top group of security contributors across stakeholder groups. And that's something the book does well, is just to map the landscape in terms of stakeholders, previous events, types of attacks, and so on. But there is this group that has a number of initiatives, and the group spans independent researchers, security firms, bug bounty platform leads, and so forth. And their initiatives include things like I've mentioned, so SEAL 911, the response channel, that's probably one of the most significant. War games I got quite involved in. Again, as a researcher, you just get dragged into writing notes, writing up postmortems of red teaming exercises with like top DeFi protocols and so on. And that's led by Isaac Patka, who I know is in and around Metagov. He does a fantastic job and was really fun to work with there on a number of initiatives, including one that was in person at the DeFi Security Summit in Thailand. And then there's other groups popping up. So Zero Shadow is a kind of crypto attack response firm, and they do like on-chain tracing and so forth. They've got a really interesting initiative around crypto freezes and fund recovery. So looking more on the kind of verifying reputation of security researchers for legitimate requests, like the legal dynamics of freezes for protocols, and then also like fund recovery and coordination really with like policymakers and federal authorities around kind of investigation and response, a lot of which is multi-jurisdiction. So these kinds of groups are popping up. Like I said, there's sleuths as well. So the always watching kind of somehow like Zach XBT characters that are now coordinating across these other groups to arrange responses, especially to the really significant protocol hacks and so forth. And so um, this is kind of a new thing, and it's also like a novel coordination mechanism that's been very ground up and is kind of native, I guess, to the blockchain ecosystem in the way that it's occurring in a very different way to traditional cybersecurity within, a single organization or an industry, for example. But they are working on sort of standards and so forth. So the third point, fragmented responsibility and accountability. So beyond the protocol layer of blockchains, there is this very off-chain kind of social layer of coordination around security. And this is largely guided by these kind of moral codes of conduct and what's right and wrong. And I think, as I mentioned, what's really been in the headlines for that is the idea of freezes, so fund freezes and recovery, and whether that should go ahead. Arbitrum just froze, I think, 75 million from the KelpDAO hack last week, and even that has been very controversial. And that was they had to invent the technical solution to be able to conduct that freeze in real time in response in a very limited window to rescue those funds. And those were the only funds that were rescued from the entire hack. But the questions that arose just this past week are also in the chapter of the book around the Bybit hack and DPRK, and whether, if you know that it's North Korea and the funds are being funneled to, nuclear weapons programs, is it right or wrong to freeze those funds if it's in your power? And that's debated within the industry. The book actually opens with the claim that, this area is, the largest challenge to the legitimacy of blockchain technology is around security and really that end point of kind of consumer protection from a traditional authorities point of view. So, it is significant to consider and respond to what's actually happening here. And then the fourth point, a lovely quote from the book, which pretty much sums it up. And I try to tie it back to not just, great narratives and, interesting anon actors, but really this perspective that it is about end users. And I think a lot of that came through in a lot of the research as well about the framing of the security responders. You can't have people using this technology if they're going to lose all their funds every time. And so, yes, case in point, that is the lesson about online life in general, really. And so next steps or future directions, I'll just touch on briefly. So I'm applying for research funding to continue working on these themes as an academic from next year, because funding rounds take time. There's a very interesting, if you're interested in this area, there's a very interesting quadratic funding round by Giveth at the moment. Funds have been unlocked from the DAO hack circa like 2017, in line with their original purpose, which was funding Ethereum sustainability and security. And so again, that's another major kind of ground up initiative that has come together in recent times in this landscape. And so there's really, if you want to get an idea of the kind of people and projects in the space, you can just go there and see who's posted stuff and who's kind of doing what. I would love to do research on incentives across the various stakeholder groups and kind of develop some design principles around that. But it's quadratic funding, which is an interesting funding mechanism. So we'll see how that goes. And if I get enough to do anything meaningful. And then I was successful in a decentralization research collective small grant with Isaac Patka from Shield 3 and some of the team at Zero Shadow, which has been like a really fun industry collaboration to do some very concise, like high impact policy oriented brief work around the fund freezes and recoveries, which I've also written an academic paper on. It was open access on SSRN. I had to take it down to submit it to be published open access in a particular journal, which I'm waiting to hear from. But hopefully that research is coming out soon. So, as I mentioned, I don't want to talk for too long. I want to leave time to hear from you guys or answer any questions. So that's it from me for now. Thank you so much. And thanks again, Metagov, for hosting.
Yay! Thank you so much, Kelsie. Oh, thanks. Um, yeah, we have a few more folks who joined us here in New York. So hey Liz, hey PatCon. Liz is over there. But yeah, so we'll now take questions. I had one come up, and folks, for those of you new to Metagov seminar, post your questions in chat, and then we create a stack of them, and then we can kind of move through them as they come in. So if you have a question, feel free to send it in chat. But Kelsie, one thing that you said stuck out to me, which was about how some things are still like debated in the community around like whether to, I forget exactly what happened, but it was like the was it I guess I want to know how like decision making happens, like when there's a breach, when there's a hack, when there's a something, like how does that decision to either like I know the famous like the DAO hack and stuff, like, but if you I'm sure you get into this in your book and stuff, like what's the latest on how people are making decisions if there's like that big like schism, right, of like fork and go off and do your own thing, or kind of coming to some agreement and all moving forward together. What have you seen when it comes to that in your work, or interesting examples of like ways people make decisions about cybersecurity breaches and what to do about them?
Yeah, good question. There's different voices and different channels as well. So, for example, SEAL 911 are kind of like fully trusted. Like you contact that channel through Telegram. And I actually detail an example of where I contacted them for like a real time that I lost money. um, due to, I try and like share the specifics so it doesn't happen to anyone else. Due to an ENS domain squatter where I actually lost Metagov as like a name on ENS because I had bought it and then it had lapsed, which I didn't realize. And then there's people that just hoover up addresses when they are due to renew. And then I had like some funds on something directed there, like some donation funds from a Gitcoin round, I think, went to the address, but the receiving address had been changed by the new owner of that platform. Very sad. I contacted Siono on like, oh, I have something to contact you for. And actually Sam Cz-san responded, which was like hilarious. So there's 24/7 volunteer monitoring of that channel, which is like amazing. Like these people, kind of can earn salaries in industry that you can't afford. Um, and he was like, yeah, not much you can do. And just send a really polite on-chain message, like asking them to please give it back. And it's a not-for-profit or something. I was like, oh. Um, but the character P. Cavasacio that I mentioned is like the chief. I've got really funny quotes from him in the book, like, got up to go to the toilet, checked SEAL 911 or whatever, and like then he's on, like there's always something to respond to. I swear the person doesn't eat or sleep, but they'll just engage. And one of the main things they do is coordination. So they'll call in other SEAL 911 responders that have institutional backing, for example, Zero Shadow or something like that, where a team will be engaged um, to, you know, figure out what happened, contact protocols in a like discreet way. So responsible disclosure is like a really big part of what they do. Try and get things, paused, investigated, shut down where possible. And then, recovery is kind of a whole nother bag that goes into sort of like legal questions and traceability and how do you actually verify, users kind of details and requests and all those kinds of things. You might have seen that if you've seen the years long, still not complete, like actual recovery stuff from the DAO where they tried to give money back to people that lost it. So that's like one side of it. And then in the other side, in terms of decisions, like it's still very much up to the protocols and their individual governance structures. And so in DeFi, that differs. The Arbitrum freeze was because Arbitrum had a security council, which hotly and confidentially, privately debated what to do, but had this window of opportunity. And people were heavily influenced by voices from Seal and so forth. That one happened kind of in private. And again, the turnaround time, like they had like a 48-hour window. And then even the transaction they submitted, I was listening to this on an Unchained podcast where Griff Green, who's on the council and very involved in the DAO stuff, was talking about it. I think the transaction had like hours before going through. So they just needed the funds like not to move in order to be able to freeze them. So it's like very touch and go stuff. The real debates about crypto freezes and what's morally appropriate for a protocol, they occur on Twitter. That the tracing I did around Bybit and Thorchain and a couple of others. Circle is another one. Everyone like really loves to give them heat as an exchange because the exchanges are obviously like another major route for funds. It's like this like social pressure from kind of key voices in the security space, yelling at and tagging founders to say like, what are you doing? Like, how could you do this? Blah blah, and these kind of really public debates. And so there's definitely favorites, like people that I've watched their stuff. They're all in favor of like Tether, for example, because Tether will respond to freeze requests from people that are, hold reputation in the security community, with the argument that you can always unfreeze if it was not the right call. Whereas other exchanges, so Circle recently, they've stated we're not going to freeze funds unless there's like a formal legal request made. But obviously, the process to get a formal legal request means the funds are completely long gone. So they're within their legal bounds, but like, are they within their moral obligations as, blockchain stakeholders? Not sure. So yeah, it's complicated and very diverse set of actors with diverse sets of interests and incentives. And part of that is, like the DeFi protocols that are routing the millions of dollars for every hack are earning millions of dollars in transaction fees. So that's, a good motivator to not want to freeze and to argue that, decentralization is decentralization. So they can continue to operate and be profitable.
Ooh, whoa, that's interesting. Um, yeah, wow, it's like a wild west of like security, open source security support. Like, yeah, that's just wild. Um, we have Ellie's question and Theo's question connected, which are sort of security crises coming potentially with increasing AI capability, especially regarding cloud mythos. Curious if, yeah, you've
Can I
been, of
just add to my question, which
course.
is that some of the commentary I've been reading about that is there's a kind of phase that we will have, and I think this is actually in the Anthropic report itself. There's a kind of phase that society will have to go through to where everything is deeply insecure, but then the same AIs will enable far more secure systems. So we won't build systems with those flaws, but we're going to have to go through this really scary transition until everything is fixed by the AI. So thoughts on that as well, if you think that's correct.
Yeah, I mean, I'm madly just collecting, public data from social media and wherever these conversations are happening about the mythos stuff, but also AI exploits as they kind of evolve. Like I mentioned, the deep fake of, your friend, the crypto founder, just wanting to jump on a call and it is not them, which is kind of scary. One of the kind of most insightful comments I heard was like, it was Kane Warwick on an Unchained podcast, of which he's a host of one of them, and he was like, this model is too powerful to be released. Like, so we will release it to a select number of companies, which I believe has already been leaked. I think I saw something that, yeah, that's like gotten out beyond the, Microsofts and Linuxes kind of the world. I mean, what they've seen so far in the reported testing from Anthropic is that, decades old zero-day exploits can be discovered. And that's occurring in crypto as well, perhaps due to enhanced kind of AI capabilities. So the balancer hack is one that occurred not so long ago that, everyone kind of, it was a real reality check because it, is a multi-time audited protocol that's been around for a number of years and yet, was exploited for something that was around. So I don't think it will go well. To someone's point in the chat, I've seen a few things about like people pulling funds out of the industry as a whole due to just the impending threat of AI and quantum. But really, like the models, yeah, aren't even released yet. So, yeah, I don't know is the answer. There's plenty of insecurity as it is, but yeah, AI is making it much more efficient to scan for bugs and also to generate exploits in multi-step, like very creative, sophisticated ways.
Hey, I'm super, thanks. I'm really interested in the way that the freezing of assets seems like you described it as kind of cowboy, and it made me like it reminded me of I'm kind of working a little bit with some folks kind of in the UN, and they're kind of talking about this crisis of, the original Red Cross principles of humanitarian work no longer seem to function because the people who can help or can move fast enough to help are sometimes military contractors or sometimes private companies or like, and like they're trying to like kind of do this renegotiate or trying to think how to do a renegotiation of the principles of humanitarian aid. Like they're basically like you just I guess I'm curious if you think this is cowboy or if this is like the leading edge of an increasing trend where the old actors, like our old buds, the financial industry who controlled this before, are no longer the actors who can move fast enough. And so there's a kind of renegotiation of the principles of how collaboration happen. And this other group is going into levels of like they wanted to know like, do the people who work at World Vision who have this special mandate, do they like mostly no longer believe in God? Do people like in government no longer believe in government? Are people at like the people who believe in the systems, are they now in other places like the blockchain companies or it was a really interesting provocation. Anyway, so I'm kind of curious if you're thinking this is a temporary kind of messiness or if this is the new small bit of the bigger messiness.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. I think it's decentralized coordination, which is being designed and built and enacted as it's being lived in the way that all of these, like that's the story of the entire industry. Like when you really take a step back, it's like the fact that Bitcoin still exists is like kind of amazing. Like if you had said to anyone that was on like the Bitcoin Talk forum in 2009, like this will be a thing in the presidential elections, you know, they wouldn't have believed you. So, yeah, I think that's why it's significant and worthwhile to spend time researching. And the ways in which it is like organic. Ellie and I did work a couple years ago and in a glossary publication for Internet Policy Review around ad hoc organizations or like this idea of pop-up organizations and that as like this native characteristic to decentralized coordination. And it's the same is true of blockchain security in the ways that things kind of natively emerge in response to need rather than kind of centralized command and control or like top-down planning. In saying that, I'm very, very interested in so the book is, because it's new material, it was really like a mapping exercise of this entire landscape for me as well in discovering, not knowing what I would discover, but just sort of following the threads. And so an important one of those, which I'm really interested to pursue, is the interfaces between, you could call it public and private, but it's really like endogenous to decentralized technology community governance, and exogenous. So, any, traditional authorities, policy, government, cybersecurity firms, and so on. So these interfaces between, for lack of a better thing, like public and private or whatever, blockchain and not blockchain. But the the traditional authorities, like the government agencies, are they have certain abilities, but their capabilities are very, very different to the industry's capabilities. And so there's like there's a real complementarity in terms of, if the industry can get the right interfaces in place and the right safeguards around, verifiable reputation to make legitimate requests to government agencies or whatever, they can actually be more effective in their responses. And so the book touches on a little bit of that, like there was a kidnapping of one of the co-founders of Ledger, the major hardware wallet in France, and SEAL 911 responds to that, and they work with French authorities, and it's like special police that go in and get the guy back and his wife. But those interfaces are really critical in effective response. And so they're still quite informal. It's really about like who you know, and as I mentioned in the kind of bit of policy work I've done with Zero Shadow, they're like, yeah, it's just our networks. Like, we know who to ask, in the US and in some places in Europe. And then sometimes we ask like, hey, does anyone know anyone in this particular place or jurisdiction or whatever to respond to something? And it comes back to the good of the community. And so they're very, yeah, shout out to them. They're very clear on some of the things that need to be done, many of which are kind of just need to be borrowed from traditional cybersecurity certifications and practices. So I'm kind of bleeding into Chase's question here about like efforts to start rating agencies for DeFi. I haven't seen so much around the DeFi side, but in terms of, how do you say what's a legitimate security investigation firm that can make a request that will be responded to? There's definitely efforts around that.
Cool. Yeah. Chase, did you want to add anything or ask any follow-ups or?
No, that was sufficient.
Cool.
I can address just the other part of that question around the sustainable funding too. That's one of the kind of key takeaways of the book, is that it's not a sustainably funded industry in terms of blockchain security. And so there's a real mismatch in terms of even the way that it's evolved, like circa 2017 ICO era, to get an audit on your protocol costs upwards of, $100,000 from any sort of security firm. And if you look on, again, I'm just sort of throwing things out there for people that want to pursue threads, but Rekt, REKT, if you looked on the Rekt leaderboard of, some of the biggest hacks in crypto, it actually says if the protocol has been audited or not and by whom. So even those big, very expensive security firms doesn't make your protocol bulletproof, because you'll see that a number of the audited protocols have still been hacked. But it just makes, that this is why, especially DeFi protocols are released into the wild and holding funds without being audited at all, because how can you as a software developer afford this kind of overhead as a barrier to just throwing out some experimental thing and seeing if it works, let alone people will use it or trust to deposit into it. And comes back to that user responsibility for actions, which is sort of one of the ethoses of blockchain. And then there's kind of this other whole major movement around like bug bounty platforms, but then people are saying, especially in response to the rise in AI use, that those days are kind of done. So there was bug bounty platforms like Uniswap, for example, only a couple months ago posted like $1 million bounty for people to find certain things or whatever. So they just throw out like these super extravagant numbers to attract attention and, you know, promote their protocol, but also, you know, I guess generally try and identify any vulnerabilities. And then also one of the bug bounty platforms I talk about in the book kind of invented the competitive bug bounty, where they run like these kind of competitions, and the reputation and leaderboards was also like, that's how kind of Sam Sun won his reputation. Now he has a permanent position actually doing security for a VC portfolio, but he kind of earned his reputation as just like a top white hat through the bounty platforms and the leaderboards there. And then that has kind of evolved now into these like very new organizations, but still is not for profit. They're donation funded and, you know, largely like volunteer led. It's people with full-time jobs or, you know, their own businesses in security or bug bounties or whatever that give their time to that. Too much time, quote unquote, according to some of them in the chat. Yeah, but it's not particularly sustainable. So that's why I'm really interested in what's happening with the DAO funds. And like I mentioned, quadratic funding is, yeah, really interesting, but also a difficult way to make sure the most high impact things get funded, because you just have to promote your thing and like have a platform to promote your thing. It's not necessarily, you know, the kind of there's certain teams doing really interesting stuff, but they're in South America, for example. They're not in the America of the world, where they, you know, have the strongest networks or the highest profile or whatever. And then I'm sure there's new things as well, like protocols and initiatives. But how do they compete in a quadratic funding round with like newsletters? Like obviously a newsletter, I got the email this morning from a really brilliant newsletter that I follow, and I hope they get funded. That'd be great. But, you know, they can email their whole database, versus some software developer that's got, you know, a great solution for some specific security thing but can't get it out there. So yeah, there's definitely a massive gap around that incentives piece, of which sustainable funding is part of. Something else that's recently emerged, to give credit where credit's due, is the $1 trillion security initiative, which is by EF. And so shout out to EF. They, prior to announcing this, they did a funding round called ETH Ranges, which is how I got the funding to make the book open access. So they took applications, they went through the EF review process, whatever, and they funded a bunch of things in the industry, yeah, which included open access academic research, go them. But then ITS is about bringing attention to kind of key security priorities, and also allocating capital, so calls for proposals to address specific issues. So again, these are still ad hoc, and it's sort of out of the moral goodness of people's beliefs in the industry. And there's a whole chapter in the start of the book around cypherpunk kind of values and where those beliefs sort of stem from, around the base libertarian ideas of like, you can do whatever you want to do, which is decentralized protocols, as long as you do no harm to others. And that's the kind of border of like, well, if you break my property and steal my funds, that's doing harm, and that's like the not okay part of security.
Awesome. Well, we have a minute left. Ellie, did you have, I see you have kind of a
Mine was more of a comment, so maybe go to Theo's.
cool. Theo's question on formally verifying everything. Theo, if you want to give voice to your question, feel free.
Not much beyond what's said.
Yeah, I would say no. So formal verification, for those that don't know, and in my very limited technical understanding, is kind of using math to make sure that the code does what it says it will do, which very smart people at very expensive auditing firms can do for you and your protocol. But really to Theo's point, he's kind of answered the question there in terms of like these efforts don't address the behavior that occurs around the protocol, and it's those interactions. And as Chase said earlier, the composability of the layers as you get to greater complexity and restaked earning yield, blah blah blah. You're going kind of up and up in the technical complexity, but then also in people's interactions with the protocol. And so the social engineering that's occurring for some of these major hacks, like Bybit, for example, it was, it's through these unsolicited calls. There's been recent examples where teams have met with British investors, oh no, British analytics firms numerous times at numerous crypto conferences around the world, and it turns out to be like a DPRK exploit. So they don't even know yet, like were these people knowingly acting on behalf of North Korea, or were they also being exploited and acting on their behalf in this kind of two-step multi-year social engineering process, which led to a protocol providing access to an analytics firm to do an integration and malware. So yeah, it's extremely sophisticated and in many senses, nation state resource backed and serious. And so yeah, I think security extends beyond the idea of formal verification or audits.
Awesome. Yeah, it does feel like the crypto, I mean, just at the cutting edge of kind of handling these things on a technical and also a social level. Like how can we extend that into what we're about to see with AI and things. So yeah, thank you so much, Kelsie, for sharing all this, for doing your research, for getting in there and reporting back. I have 1,000,001 more questions about even just like that alone, like the experience of like being in these group chats or the process of how you do your research. So I hope we do continue the conversation in the Metagov seminar channel, and also maybe yeah, Kelsie, continuing. I know you're maybe about to be a little busy, but hopefully you can come back and hang again soon with Metagov. Um, and once we all read your book, I'm sure we'll have lots more questions. So thank you so much for now. Thanks everyone for coming. And yeah, I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Woo!
Thanks, Val. Thanks for hosting, and thanks everyone for joining and the questions.
Live in New York, Metagov seminar. Thanks everyone. Bye.